Now, if we take this consideration of basic training and look at it from the point of view of of negative basic training, we're able to enumerate some of the consequences of that negativity. In other words, I do not feel like I have been witnessed. I have not been supported. I do not feel emotionally secure, emotionally confident. I have been made to doubt it. And that's when I am criticized for my feeling, when I am contradicted in it, when some kind of a reproach or some kind of attack is implicitly visited upon me, especially when that's repeated and I grow used to feeling it over and over. Now, basically, I, as a child, as a growing human, will grow to doubt whether or not I'm intelligent, to doubt whether I can trust my feelings, to doubt whether or not my energy is a good thing or a bad thing, to doubt my desires, to doubt my ambitions, to doubt what I want to do in life. Now, all this nonsense, and I really mean to use that word, about depression and those kinds of words, you see, do not recognize that the feeling of downness, the feeling of sadness, the feeling of confusion or doubt that I am experiencing is the result of having a repeated experience of doubt, of reproach, of attack upon some aspect of myself. In other words, I'm not saying that such a negative, dire, dark feeling is in any way positive or good. It's a bad feeling. There's no question of that. But it's the right feeling in the sense that I am actually responding to the experience that I've been subjected to when my basic training was not good, when my caretakers don't know how to instruct and support my energies, my abilities, my ambitions as effectively as they need to be. As a result, I am going to doubt it. I am going to have some sense of defect, some sense of not having what I have. And that turns the entire dialogue that I enter into as an adult human being in another direction. If you're smart, it puts me in danger. If you're successful, it puts me in danger. If you're emotionally rich, it puts me in danger. If you're full of success and ambition and all that, it puts me in danger, you see. And so such a person is essentially trying to make good what was not given. And I really want to emphasize that particular phrase because I believe that the basis of the difficulties that we run into psychologically are essentially that I was not nurtured in my intelligence, in my emotional sensitivity, in the vitality of my sexuality, in the vitality of my energy. And so I need to go to the rest of my life questing for that kind of answer to who I am. And that means that other people have to pay the price of taking care of me, of filling the gaps that were left in my being. Now, the first place where that manifests itself, you see, and this is where the circle in a certain sense becomes vicious, is in the adult caretakers of the children. What most parents who are unaware of this dynamic, but who are nonetheless doing it, note I stress that over and over, what they're doing is, why aren't you a good boy? Why aren't you a good girl? Why don't you take care of me? Why don't you do the things that I need? We're back to that grandmother that I cited a while ago. Why are you embarrassing me? Why are you making noise, little 11-month-old boy, and making me feel bad about my place in the world? Why don't you act in a way that fills my gap, you see? And so that grandmother is, first of all, she was shaming her daughter, who was the mother of that child, and then who knows what destructiveness was being visited on the little boy. And that's a good illustration of what happens in bad basic training. The adults, the caretakers, are essentially attempting to extract from their children what it is they never got. So, what's wrong with you? Why don't you act the way I want you to? What's wrong with you? Why don't you behave the way I think you should? What's wrong with you? Why don't you think the way I want you to? What's wrong with you? Why don't you have the ambitions and the professions that I think would be good? What's wrong with you? Why don't you do better in school? What's wrong with you? Why don't you have nicer friends? Etc., etc., etc. So the kinds of painful inflictions of doubt that are too often characteristic of basic training essentially come from basic training that's already been defective. In other words, we pass it on. But that means that someone raised that way is going to go through the rest of the world acting in exactly that way. Now, my favorite example of the kind of product that comes out of this negative training is what is usually referred to as narcissism. That's a word that I go on the warpath about, because people will talk about it. Oh, she's a terrible narcissist, you see. And what it means is that that person is too full of himself or herself. This person is so overbearing that he's just insufferable. She cannot be born, right? And of course, it's in fact just the opposite. Someone who is a narcissist, or who acts what we call narcissistically, is someone whose gap is so vast, so deep, that he or she can never fill it. And so they go through life essentially tyrannizing, essentially colonizing, essentially invading the people around them in the desperate attempt to fill a gap which has been inflicted in that way. And the tragedy of these people, when the gap is deep enough and the pain is hurtful enough, is that they go through life consistently looking to procure this. But even were it supplied, and of course never can be, but were it even supplied, they couldn't believe it, because they have been trained, habituated into feeling in their very being that there is a gap in themselves, that it can never be filled. So yes, they're hungry. Yes, they're essentially emotional vampires. Yes, they go through life essentially excavating in other people to get what they need, you see, but in fact they can never believe it. And that's the real tragedy of these people. A favorite example of mine of this kind of thing is when people will express the idea of someone as being terribly spoiled. Now, that's the same idea. Someone who's spoiled has been given too much, is too wealthy, or has too many toys, or too many parts of life that are whatever, you see. And it really is exactly the opposite. In other words, if something is just routinely given, if something is given and is not accompanied by a kind of supportive regard for the person, for the child for whom it has been given, they will essentially not believe it. They will essentially be inundated with product, inundated with gifts, inundated with toys or whatever, money, but it will not mean anything. It will not register in that person that he or she has anything. And so they will look for more. I think I mentioned a while ago, a client of mine many years ago told me that he went with his father to an amusement park one day. He was about 12 years old, 13 years old, and all he did all day long was nag for a balloon with hot air in it, so that it would float in the air on a string. And his father kept turning him down and refusing, till finally, when this young boy persisted in his demands, so I said, all right, I'll buy you the balloon. So they went over to the stand. The father bought the balloon and put the balloon in the boy's hand, and he let go of it and let it fly away. And telling me about it, what he said was, after all, it was just about getting it. And there it is. You see, I got the thing, but I don't really have it. And I just want to be given one more meaningless thing and just let it go. So you could say, oh, what a spoiled brat. Look at that all day long. He nagged for that balloon. And finally, he was given the balloon, and look what he did with it. Well, the point is, why did he do that with it? In other words, why was that the way he treated the gift when it was finally put into his hands? And that is a very good, essentially, discernment of the pattern that we enact over and over again when we cannot believe in anything we've been given, because we have not been given. We don't have the confidence, the faith in the fact that I am entitled to do this. So one of my favorite examples of this kind of thing is the ability to recognize and acknowledge whatever is positively true. You see, if you can say to a person, well, are you brilliant? And he or she can say, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. That's not conceit. That's not narcissism. That's not being overblown, if it's true, you see. And way I like to say that is that genuine humility, by the way, the word humility comes from the word humus, or so that which is grounded, which is as solid as dirt, you see. And if I am really genuinely humble, then I can speak and acknowledge absolutely accurately with what is true. You say, yeah, I've got really great energy. Yes, I've had wonderful success. In fact, I'm very rich. In fact, I've been very successful. In fact, I'm extremely good looking. Yes, in fact, I love my sexuality. Whatever it is, as long as I have been allowed to see and own what is true. When people sing happy birthday to me, it happens to be my birthday, and I am happy. Yes.